A lone human soldier stares at the intelligence briefing. His mission, retrieve a high-value target from a war zone. But when he hears a faint, desperate cry through the chaos, everything changes. This isn't just another mission. This is a choice that could alter the course of an interstellar war. Will he follow orders? Or his conscience? The briefing room hummed with the static charge of tactical projections. Coordinates rippled across the screen in angry red glyphs. Enemy positions marked north of the Kashida Ridge. Extraction protocols scrolled alongside, each bullet point bleeding into the next with clinical detachment. Standard insertion, non-standard exfil. The soldier leaned forward, breath fogging the glass display panel. Command's voice rasped through the speaker grid. Priority Alpha package recovery. Subject identifies as Valen nobility. First direct contact with their ruling caste in 14 months of engagement. A dossier flipped open on the main screen. Grainy footage of a slender figure moving through smoke, silver hair catching the light like quicksilver. She left the northern stronghold voluntarily. Human intelligence suggests discord in their chain of command. The soldier's fingers traced the ridge on his tactical map, 60 clicks behind contested, lines through terrain so irradiated, it fuzzed out his HUD's topographical scans. His thumb hesitated over the image enhancement controls. The zoom revealed luminous green eyes in the grainy footage, pupils slit like a cat's. No weapons visible, no hostile posture, just a woman standing at the edge of a crater, robes billowing in the toxic wind. Combat analysts assess high probability she possesses undocumented capabilities. The briefing officer continued. Classified as extremely dangerous despite no kinetic engagement on record. The projection switched to thermal scans, a humanoid outline radiating cooler than baseline Valen physiology. Notes scrolled past about electromagnetic resonance anomalies and unverified psionic signatures. No footage, no eyewitness accounts. Just theoretical threats typed in stark black letters. He accepted the mission chip without comment. Standard loadout, MK-47 pulse rifle with underbarrel stunner, level V radiation weave, medkit with enough stims to sprint 40 clicks if the extract bird got shot down. The armor's polymer plates clicked into place with practiced efficiency, while the mission clock ticked down in his peripheral display. 02:59:47 until window closure. Outside the armory, the war rumbled like distant thunder. Artillery flashes backlit the base's razor wire perimeter every 8 seconds. Sustained shelling of the northern trench networks. His fingers tightened around the dossier tablet until the plastic creaked. 3 blurry images rotated on loop. The princess standing in ruins, kneeling beside a wounded soldier that could have been human or Valen, staring directly at a surveillance drone with an expression that wasn't fear. The dropship bay smelled of ozone and hydraulic fluid. Mechanics worked under the belly of a Nightshade-class insertion craft, welding fresh armor over last week's plasma burns. His pilot barely glanced up from the nav computer. LZ's hotter than last time. Command says you've got 12 minutes from touchdown to package secure before they scramble interceptors. He checked the rifle's charge pack 3 times. The safety clicked on, then off, then on again. The dossier didn't explain why Valen royalty would abandon their fortress. Didn't speculate why she'd wander alone through the most irradiated valley on the continent. Just reiterated the tactical advantage her capture would provide. A bargaining chip, an intelligence windfall, a propaganda victory. Turbines whined to life beneath the dropship's wings. Somewhere beyond those mountains, a woman with quicksilver hair awaited retrieval or death. The soldier exhaled slowly as the bay doors opened onto a sky streaked with artillery fire. 12 minutes to find the impossible. 12 minutes to decide if he was bringing back a prisoner or a person. The night swallowed the dropship whole. The landing zone burned. Twisted metal skeletons of demolished buildings jutted from pockmarked earth, their jagged edges blackened by artillery strikes. The soldier moved through ruins still warm from plasma fire, boots sinking into ash that hadn't settled since the bombardment. His HUD painted threat vectors in pulsing orange. Movement sensors couldn't distinguish between wind-tossed debris and hostiles in this wasteland. Radiation warnings flickered at the edge of his vision, numbers climbing with each step toward the northern ridge. 3 minutes in, the first anomaly registered. His audio filters caught it first, a frequency cutting through the static burps of dead comm lines. Not the mechanical chatter of Valen encryption. Not even human wavelengths, just a voice or what remained of one after distortion. He froze beside a collapsed transit terminal, finger hovering near his rifle's trigger housing. The sound came again, clearer now. A repeating phrase in melodic Velan, syllables stretched thin by transmission decay. His translator implant stuttered before resolving the word. Resolve. No coordinates accompanied the transmission. No biometric signature to confirm the speaker matched his dossier photo. Just that single word cycling every 7 seconds, floating in the dead zone between military bands. His tactical display flashed a stern warning when he pivoted toward the signal source. 32 degrees off mission vector, straight through terrain marked crimson on threat assessment overlays. The extraction timer ticked down in his retinal display. 8 minutes 17 seconds until the Nightshade's evac window closed. Protocol demanded he ignore ambient noise and proceed to the verified last known coordinates. The ruins grew denser as he followed the signal. Tower fragments leaned against each other like drunken sentinels, their fractured surfaces webbed with bioluminescent lichen that glowed faintly in the toxic fog. His radiation badge darkened to warning purple. The voice grew stronger, resolving into tones that shouldn't have carried emotion across species lines. There was exhaustion in those syllables now, and something perilously close to relief. His boots crunched over shattered data tablets, their screens still displaying civilian transit schedules frozen at the moment of attack. At the 5-minute mark, his motion tracker lit up with blips moving parallel to his path, 3, maybe 4 heat signatures keeping pace just beyond visual range. His rifle's power cell hummed as he thumbed off the safety. The voice continued its lonely broadcast, leading him deeper into ruins that stank of ozone and decaying polymers. Radiation warnings screamed silently across his display as he stepped through what remained of a hospital's triage archway. Collapsed walls, rows of empty beds covered in peeling sheets, one miraculously intact holochart still projecting the name of a patient who'd never returned for treatment. Then he saw her. Crouched beside an overturned supply crate, silver hair matted with grime, hands moving delicately over a damaged transmitter. Her robes were the color of storm clouds, their intricate embroidery frayed at the edges. She looked up when his shadow crossed the threshold, green eyes reflecting the HUD's glow. The transmitter crackled one final resolve before dying with a whine. A tremor passed through her fingers. Not fear, but the kind of exhaustion that follows long solitude. His comms officer's voice shattered the moment. Package status? Static made the demand sound harsher than intended. The Valen woman tilted her head at the sound, listening to words she couldn't understand. The soldier's hand tightened on his rifle. 7 hostiles now registered on motion sensors, closing in. Extraction timer read 5 minutes. Protocol required verification. Orders demanded compliance. Her lips moved, forming syllables his translator rendered a heartbeat later. They told me humans couldn't hear this frequency. Not a plea. Just a fact stated softly into the poisoned air between them. In that moment, the tactical briefing's clinical terms, high-value target, strategic asset, dangerous capabilities, dissolved like the ashes beneath his boots. What remained was a woman, a voice calling for resolve in the ruins, and a decision already made as he reached for his medkit instead of his restraints. The crater exhaled blue light like slow breath. Gamma readings on the soldier's wrist display spiked past survivable thresholds, but at its center stood a figure untouched by the poison air. Tattered robes, not battlefield camouflage but the dusky purple of Valen twilight, fluttered against legs that trembled with exhaustion rather than fear. She turned when his boot dislodged a pebble. Silver hair swung like fluid metal, catching the unnatural glow from the crater's depths. Her eyes found his without hesitation, hazel green threaded with gold, the vertical pupils contracting against his helmet lamps. The dossier hadn't mentioned how their gleam carried intelligence rather than animal alertness. His rifle's grip grew slick under gloved fingers. "I'm not here to hurt you." The words left his mouth before tactics registered. His barrel dipped toward the scorched earth, the motion sending warning glyphs skittering across his HUD. Protocol demanded restraint procedures for unsecured hostiles. His hands ignored the training. She studied his insignia first, the stark black eagle of Earth's Expeditionary Corps, then his exposed jaw beneath the raised visor. Her nostrils flared, taking in human scent through air that reeked of ionized particles. "You came alone?" The question landed somewhere between disbelief and amusement, her voice roughened by dehydration yet still carrying that melodic Velan inflection. Static crackled in his earpiece. The Nightshade pilot's voice cut through. 2 minutes to extract window closure. Confirm package secured. He muted the transmission without breaking eye contact. Her hands opened slowly, palms angled downward in what his cultural briefing called the Velan non-threat. Fingers spread to show no concealed weapons, but palms turned to signify no submission either. The gesture pulled her sleeve back, revealing wrist scars that matched Earth prison restraint marks. They trained you well, she observed, watching his gaze track the injuries. Shoot first. Ask when the body's cold. His helmet's targeting reticle centered on her forehead without conscious command, then flickered out when he disengaged the safeties entirely. The crater's luminescence painted her cheekbones in watery blue, catching the hollows beneath them. Starvation thin, yes, but her posture held the effortless straightness of someone accustomed to high ceilings and attentive audiences. A proximity alert chimed. 5 hostiles circling at 200 meters. His thigh compartment held restraints rated for Velan physiology. His fingers bypassed them for the hydration capsule instead. You heard my message. She stated it as fact, stepping closer over ground that hissed faintly where her bare feet touched irradiated stone. Most humans can't process frequencies above 28 kilohertz. Your augmentation is unexpected. The pilot's voice returned, urgent now. Movement on scanners. Multiple inbound. Rifle-ready muscles twitched, but she didn't flinch at the noise. Something in her weary expression suggested she'd already heard the approaching footsteps through ground vibrations. He tossed the hydration capsule. She caught it left-handed, her right staying conspicuously still, a tension in the shoulder that hinted at old damage. The way she unscrewed the cap with her teeth spoke louder than any dossier about time spent in captivity. Secure the package or abort, the pilot demanded. The extract timer burned red in his vision. 73 seconds remaining. The circling footfalls grew louder, definitely Velan by their syncopated rhythm. Standard procedure dictated combat withdrawal. Instead, he stretched his empty hand toward her, palm up in the human variant of peace. She rose from the debris as if the ruins were simply an extension of her throne room. Dirt streaked her face, but her chin stayed level. The dossier hadn't prepared him for this. The way her bare shoulders stayed squared despite fatigue, how her torn robe draped like court regalia. They told you I was a weapon. Her voice carried no inflection, as though stating the weather. One hand lifted toward the horizon, fingers moving with the precision of someone accustomed to being watched. That tower you've been shelling for weeks? Your intelligence calls it a command hub. He followed her gesture. The structure loomed black against the sky, its spires jagged from bombardment. His helmet display automatically tagged it with tactical data. Priority strike zone, confirmed enemy communications relay. It's a hospital, she said. The last functional one on this continent. His targeting reticule flickered over the building's outline. 13 successful airstrikes logged in mission records. Thermal scans showed no weapons installations, just clusters of heat signatures in the lower levels, where presumably beds would be. The dossier suddenly made sense. Not her tactical value, but her silence. No demands, no bargaining, just that repeated plea for resolve in the static. He'd been briefed about Velan medical tech, how their biosynthesizers could regrow limbs in days, how their neural menders could reverse brain damage from radiation, all classified as military assets rather than humanitarian tools. She watched his gaze cycle through the realization. Your commanders know exactly what's inside that building. They've known since the first recon flight spotted the triage lights. A thin scar on her neck caught the light as she turned, too precise to be shrapnel, the width of a restraint collar. I wasn't captured, soldier. I walked out. And when my mother refused to surrender our healers to your generals, they sent you to bring me back. His HUD flashed another proximity warning. 5 hostiles closing, now within 100 meters. The extraction timer hit 0. The Nightshade would already be lifting off without him. Her fingers skimmed the rubble beside them, coming away with a handful of broken glass. They wanted me to weaponize our medical tech, turn regeneration into a combat advantage. The shards tumbled from her palm, catching firelight. Pain suppression fields could make soldiers indifferent to wounds. Neural acceleration could reduce reaction times below human thresholds. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbled. The approaching footsteps hesitated, then changed trajectory, circling rather than advancing. I refused to sign the research orders, she continued. So they kept testing anyway. 18 months in their black labs before I got loose. She touched the scars at her wrists absently. Fascinating. How humans react when something they view as property develops a conscience. His rifle hung forgotten at his side. All the mission briefings, the classified docs stamped urgent priority. Not one had mentioned she was a scientist. A pacifist. Someone who'd escaped not to spy, but because Earth's military wanted to pervert her people's healing arts into tools of endless war. The circling figures resolved into view. 3 Valen warriors in tattered medic insignia, their weapons lowered. The tallest inclined his head toward the princess with something between reverence and relief. Your Grace, the medic murmured. The burn ward needs you. She didn't move immediately, her eyes still locked onto the soldiers. High-value target? A whisper of amusement colored the words. Only because your superiors fear what happens when war stops being profitable. The medic shifted impatiently. Another explosion rocked the distant hospital tower, sending fresh smoke spiraling into the dusk. She turned then, silver hair catching the last of the light, and walked toward the ruins without checking to see if he followed. The static burst in his earpiece made his jaw clench. Extraction team en route to primary coordinates, the voice crackled. Stand by for evac sweep. Standard procedure flashed through his mind. Restrain the target, signal for pickup, debrief upon return. The words tasted like stale rations. She stood motionless 5 paces away, watching him with those luminous eyes. Not pleading, not threatening, just waiting, as if she'd already mapped every possible outcome on some internal star chart. Beneath layers of grime and exhaustion, her expression held a quiet certainty that made his training manual seem childish. Another explosion rocked the northern ridge, close enough to make pebbles dance across the cracked pavement. The medic at her side flinched, but she didn't, just turned her face toward the sound as if reading some story in the reverberations. His helmet display calculated the blast radius. Civilian sector. Residential blocks if the old city map still applied. His rifle strap dug into his shoulder. The extraction timer pulsed in his peripheral vision. 97 seconds until the gunship reached his original position. Protocol demanded he signal for reroute. Confirm high-value asset secured. His fingers hovered over the comms panel. She exhaled slowly, her breath fogging in the cooling air. They're shelling the evacuation routes now. A statement, not an accusation. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, nails caked with dirt from digging through rubble. Your commanders promised safe passage for medical convoys. Your signatures are on the accords, the words landed like stones. He remembered the briefing packet. 3 pages of legalese about temporary humanitarian corridors, all stamped approved pending tactical reassessment. The pen strokes had looked so final on the digital page. Behind them, one of the Valen medics hissed through sharp teeth. A child's cry echoed from the ruined hospital, thin and reedy in the toxic air. The princess didn't turn toward the sound, but something in her posture shifted. A slight lean forward as if her body remembered how to comfort even when her hands stayed empty. His comms unit buzzed again. Final confirmation required for evac adjustment. The mechanical voice held no judgment, just a blinking cursor awaiting his input. The gunship's coordinates app. The ruined streets whispered under their footsteps, her bare soles soundless where his armored boots kicked up pumice and broken glass. She navigated the destruction like water flowing through cracks, her silver hair catching moonlight whenever they passed beneath skeletal building frames. The soldier's HUD kept superimposing tactical data across her silhouette. Threat indicators, motion tracking, all the sterile metrics that suddenly felt absurd when applied to someone stepping carefully around a crushed doll, half buried in debris. He'd seen Valens before, of course. Combat footage showed them as angular shadows behind energy shields, their features distorted by refractive armor. Training vids emphasized the claws, retractable talons capable of shredding reinforced polymers. Yet when she reached to steady herself against a leaning wall, her fingers stretched long and unadorned, fingertips smoothing across the concrete like a musician testing piano keys. No claws, no scales, just skin paler than his but similarly vulnerable when a sharp edge nicked her knuckle. "You're bleeding," he said. The words tasted strange, 6 months of urban warfare had taught him Valen blood burned like acid. Hers welled up ordinary red, just slightly darker than human. She blinked at the droplet gathering on her skin. You thought it would be otherwise. Not a question. His helmet's targeting display flickered as she moved ahead, the system struggling to categorize her heat signature. Standard Valen physiology ran 3 degrees cooler than human, another checkbox in the alien threat columns. But her breath fogged in the night air just like his, the rhythm of her shoulders lifting with exertion, nearly identical to a human, woman's. Only the eyes betrayed something different, those vertically slit pupils widening, now as she paused beneath a gap in the ruins, where stars wheeled brightly. You navigate by those? He followed her gaze upward to the constellations. We call them the Weaver's threads. Her fingers traced invisible lines between the stars, the motion practiced. Your people see the same patterns but name them differently. Hunters, bears, warriors. A faint smile touched her lips as she glanced back at him. So many names for death and violence in your skies. The observation lodged in his ribs like shrapnel. His HUD's orientation markers still use those ancient names, Orion, Ursa Major, passed down from soldiers to soldiers across centuries. The star patterns hadn't changed, only the hands pointing at them. She turned abruptly left where the street forked, avoiding a corridor his tactical map flagged as clear. Collapsed sewer line under that pavement, she murmured when he hesitated. His boot tested the ground, normal resistance. Then a faint hollow sound. How did you? The stars tell more than direction. The pull changes when you stand over voids. She touched her temple lightly. Your implant would detect it if you let it. His targeting system pinged suddenly, 3 heat signatures approaching from the east. Years of conditioning tightened his grip on the rifle. Her hand closed over the barrel before he could raise it fully, her fingers barely spanning the circumference. Wait. A single word, soft but carrying the weight of command. The figures materialized from smoke. 2 Valen children clutching the shoulder straps of an elderly male whose robes bore medical insignia. All 3 froze at the sight of the soldier, the old man's throat working soundlessly. The princess stepped forward, hands open in that palms-down gesture. The children's fear melted into recognition, then something like awe. One reached for her stained robes with small 3-fingered hands, no horns, no claws. Just wide eyes reflecting firelight as the princess knelt to their level, murmuring words his translator couldn't catch. The old medic swayed on his feet, one hand pressed to what looked like a shrapnel wound weeping dark green. All the mission briefings, the classified xenobiology reports, none had mentioned Valen children looked so heartbreakingly small when crying. None prepared him for how perfectly a human-sized medkit fit against their narrow shoulders. The princess glanced back as he unclipped his emergency trauma gel. Her luminous eyes held no triumph, only quiet understanding as she accepted the cartridge with fingers still marked by the old restraint scars. In that moment, standing amid ruins with starlight tangling in her hair and alien children clinging to her skirts, she rewrote every line of his training manuals in a language more universal than war. Dusk painted Ridgepoint in shades of bruised purple. The soldier's HUD flickered as 3 heat signatures resolved into figures stepping from the smoke. Valen warriors clad in armor that drank in the fading light. Their curved blades hummed with charged energy, casting blue reflections across the cracked pavement. Instinct brought his rifle up, sights aligning on the lead warrior's throat. Muscle memory dictated the next motions. Breathe out, gradual pressure on the trigger. The princess moved first. She stepped into the kill zone with no more hesitation than someone crossing a familiar room. Her hands opened at her sides, palms forward, fingers slightly curled. Not surrender, not supplication. A regal stillness radiated from her as she spoke words too fast for his translator to parse. The guttural syllables carried both plea and command, a tonal duality only royalty could wield. The lead warrior's blade dipped halfway through its lethal arc. The energy field along its edge wavered, casting erratic shadows. His eyes, amber behind a segmented visor, locked onto the princess's face. Recognition flashed there, followed by something deeper. The other 2 warriors hesitated, bodies coiled between attack and retreat. Static crackled in the soldier's earpiece, background chatter from distant human patrols. The sounds of a war still raging beyond this pocket of stillness. His finger stayed taut on the trigger, every instinct screaming about compromised positioning. 3 hostiles at 12 meters would take 2.4 seconds to neutralize, according to training simulations. Harness the twitch response. Prioritize center mass. Then her voice cut through the calculations, clear in his native tongue. I am not their enemy. Her next words sent a shock through his nervous system. And neither are you. The lead warrior's helmet retracted with a hiss. Beneath it lay a face seamed with old scars, the tips of his pointed ears notched from battles the soldier vaguely remembered winning. The warrior's pupils dilated as he took in the princess's torn robes, the dirt under her nails the way she stood slightly favoring her left leg. His blade lowered completely. Your grace? The honorific came out rough, edged with disbelief. His companions exchanged glances, their weapons still raised but no longer humming at full charge. She answered in Velan again, the words flowing like water over stone. Whatever she said contained power beyond the syllables. The lead warrior's shoulders dropped an inch. His gaze flicked to the soldier's rifle, then back to her face. A silent communication passed between them, something older than this conflict. The soldier's earpiece squawked with an incoming alert, unidentified movement northeast. The warriors tensed at the electronic noise but didn't attack. Instead, their leader made a gesture the briefing manuals never covered. Fingers splayed over his heart, then extended toward the princess. A salute, an apology, a farewell. She inclined her head. Not a bow. Just enough acknowledgement to set the warriors moving backward. Their retreat was tactical, disciplined, but their blades stayed dark. The last one paused just beyond the smoke's edge, looking at the soldier with an expression that defied translation. Then they were gone, leaving only ripples in the settling dust. The princess exhaled and touched a spot low on her ribs, where her robe revealed old scar tissue, jagged, poorly healed. Zithus's faction, she said softly. They purge anyone showing mercy to humans. His rifle finally lowered. Sweat cooled on his palms. The encounter had lasted less than 90 seconds, yet it rewrote his understanding of battlefield dynamics. The briefing vid showed Velan warriors as fanatics, incapable of hesitation. This was something else. She studied his face. You expected them to kill me on sight. He holstered the rifle. The motion felt heavier than usual. I expected them to kill us both. Wind stirred the smoke between them. Somewhere north, artillery rumbled. Her fingers brushed his wrist, not lingering, just enough to confirm his pulse still raced. That's why I had to say it plainly, she murmured. So you'd hear the truth at least once before? She caught herself, shook her head. The unspoken words hung there, before someone made them enemies again. They moved on through the ruins, her steps lighter now that unseen tensions had eased. Behind them, Ridgepoint swallowed the last of the daylight. Ahead, the war waited, but for these few breaths, they walked through a silence that felt almost like peace. The first detonation hit just as their boots left the ridgeline. The shockwave lifted the princess's silver hair like a banner caught in a storm. The soldier yanked her behind a collapsed storage tank, his palm pressing flat against her shoulder blades to shield her from the heat wash. She ran like a refugee, not a royal, each stride streamlined to preserve energy. Her tattered robes rippling behind her with calculated efficiency. This wasn't the panicked sprint of someone new to war. Her footfalls landed precisely where the rubble offered stable purchase, compensating for bare feet that had no business moving so deftly through a bombardment zone. His HUD outlined their path in pulsing green, marking the artillery's probable trajectories. They had 7 seconds between salvos at first, enough time to cover 30 yards before the next impact. Then the intervals tightened, 5 seconds, then 4. The vibrations crawled up his shins each time the earth erupted, telegraphing their pursuers' adjustments to bracket their position. A lateral blast sent them sprawling behind the husk of an anti-aircraft battery. His armored weight hit the ground first, absorbing most of the impact when she crashed into him. She rolled immediately to a crouch, one hand tugging at his wrist. No words, just eyes wide and luminous in the firelight, her breathing controlled despite the ash coating her lips. They zigzagged through skeletal buildings, their path erratic to confused targeting systems. Each detonation painted stark shadows across the ruins, monstrous silhouettes that leaped and twisted with every explosion. The princess ducked under a sagging girder, her body angled to slip through spaces his broad-shouldered frame had to circumvent. Shrapnel pinged off his chest plate. Something warm trickled down his temple. At 3-second intervals, decision simplified to limbic math. Veer toward the collapsed commissary because its double-layered walls might deflect the shockwave. Avoid the open courtyard where 3 severed power lines danced like dying snakes. He counted his inhalations between concussive booms. 2 breaths meant another salvo inbound. 1 meant impact imminent. The princess grabbed his elbow at the mouth of a drainage culvert. Not this way. She panted the words, shaking her head toward the dark tunnel his HUD suggested as shelter. Thermal bloom. His visor hadn't registered it yet, the subtle shimmer of air betraying incendiaries set to roll through confined spaces. She'd recognized the trap before his tech could. They banked right instead, scrambling up a shale slope that bit into their palms. The artillery adjusted again. The blasts walked steadily uphill behind them now, methodical as chess pieces closing on a king. He risked a glance back, saw the calculated pattern, the way each explosion herded them toward a gauntlet of pre-sighted kill zones. The princess stumbled as they crested another rise. He caught her by the forearm, felt the fine bones beneath the skin. Blood welled from a gash on her calf where a shard of broken masonry had bitten deep. She shook her head when he reached for the med kit on his thigh. Not yet. Just that, 2 syllables carrying the weight of a soldier's discipline beneath the regal veneer. Their pursuers had stopped firing. That meant ground troops were closing in. The silence felt heavier than the thunder of shells. She pointed toward a gutted transport depot. There, the sublevel still has integrity. The words came out clipped, efficient. He understood without elaboration. They needed cover before the infantry arrived. His boot kicked aside a skeletal robotic limb as they breached the depot's blast doors. Darkness swallowed them whole. Only when they'd descended 3 flights of fractured stairs did either breathe fully. The princess slumped against a support column, her fingers pressed to her ribcage where old scars intersected new bruises. Above, the bombardment resumed, now concentrated on the routes they hadn't taken. Someone had gambled on predictable human behavior and lost. She tilted her head toward the ceiling, listening to destruction rain down on hypothetical escape paths. They teach you to anticipate enemy movement, she murmured, not to think like a medic avoiding triage lines. His gloves left smears of soot and blood on the railing as he leaned next to her. 7 minutes of sprinting through hell and they'd bought themselves an intermission. No more. The real hunt would begin soon enough. The gates rose from the morning mist like frozen lightning, crystalline spires twisting skyward in patterns that hurt the eyes to follow. The soldiers squinted against the glare bouncing off their faceted surfaces. At ground level, armored sentries snapped to attention, their energy pikes humming to life as 2 exhausted figures emerged from the war zone's smoke. The princess walked ahead now, her bare feet leaving faint impressions in the pearlescent dust of the approach road. Blood crusted her calf wound. Ash streaked her silver hair black in places. Yet something in her posture shifted with each step closer to the gates, spine straightening, shoulders rolling back, fingers flexing at her sides as if shaking off years of captivity. A whisper slithered through the ranks of sentries. One guard's helmet retracted abruptly, revealing eyes gone wide. The title traveled through them like current through a circuit, the Lost Star. The princess didn't flinch at the gasps, didn't acknowledge the weapons lowering in her presence. She simply stopped 3 paces from the gates and lifted her chin. "Tell my mother." Her voice wavered only once. A human might have missed it. The soldiers didn't. Their pikes clattered against breastplates as every guard in the phalanx went to one knee. Beyond the gates, movement rippled through the stronghold's tiered balconies. Curtains of liquid metal parted. More figures emerged, courtiers in flowing silks, scholars with data crystals braided into their hair, warriors bearing scars older than the conflict with Earth. None spoke as the princess stepped forward, but their collective indrawn breath hissed like wind through dead grass. The soldier hesitated at the threshold. His HUD painted threat assessments across every surface, 47 armed hostiles within 20 meters, architecture offering no viable cover, escape routes narrowing to 0. His rifle strap dug into his shoulder, then the gate sang. A harmonic vibration shuddered through the crystal as some unseen mechanism responded to the princess's presence. The massive doors split along invisible seams, retracting into the walls without a sound. The stronghold's interior unfurled before them, vaulted ceilings refracting light into prismatic patterns, floors tiled with what looked like captured starlight, ramps spiraled upward in defiance of gravity, connecting levels where robed figures now pressed against translucent railings. At the center of it all, atop a dais that shimmered like oil on water, stood the Valen Queen. She wore no crown, needed none. Her silver hair cascaded over shoulders wrapped in a mantle of shifting blues, azure at one angle, indigo at another. The soldier recognized the same luminous eyes from the dossier, but where the princess's held weary determination, the queen's burned with something that made his armor feel suddenly superfluous. Silence pooled in the cavernous chamber. The princess took 5 measured steps forward. Then 10. The queen didn't move. Only when they stood close enough to touch did the older woman's hand rise, hesitating in the air between them as if fearing an illusion might shatter. Fingers met. The contact sent visible ripples through the queen's mantle, the fabric reacting to her emotional state like mood ring polymers. You brought her back. The queen's words, when they came, sliced through the quiet with unexpected softness. Her gaze shifted to the soldier for the first time, taking in his battered armor. The human blood dried along his temple. Behind them, the gates began closing on warriors who'd pursued them across half a continent. Battle-ready figures now stood frozen at the threshold, blades half drawn, their faces caught between duty and awe. The princess didn't turn to look. She simply tightened her grip on her mother's hand as the queen's other palm rose in a clear command. The gates halted their motion, leaving a gap wide enough for the pursuing party to enter if they dared. None did. Metal sang again as the doors sealed completely, cutting off the war's roar like a surgeon excising a tumor. In the sudden quiet, the queen exhaled a breath that must have been held for years. The soldier saw it then, the moisture gathering along her lower lashes, identical in color and viscosity to her daughter's. The princess swayed slightly on her feet. Only then did the queen's regal mask crack. Hands that had signed death warrants and peace treaties alike now fluttered over her child's injuries, tracing each wound with a healer's precision. "You're home," she whispered. Somewhere beyond those impossible walls, artillery continued its mindless rhythm. But in that crystalline moment, the only war that mattered had already been won. The throne room crystallized into silence, every courtier and guard frozen mid-motion. The Valen Queen stood illuminated beneath the vaulted ceiling, where liquid light dripped through crystalline panes. Years of war had carved new lines around her eyes, but her posture remained unbent beneath robes the color of eventide, shifting hues moving across the fabric with each slow breath she took. One step, then another, the measured pace of a ruler who had practiced this approach in nightmares. The soldier watched from the periphery, his armor scorched and bloodied, fingers twitching near empty ammunition slots. The princess stood motionless ahead of him, bare feet leaving faint smears of battlefield ash on polished stone. Their hands met at the center of that vast chamber. The queen's fingers trembled first, barely perceptible vibrations betraying the regal control she'd maintained for years. Then came the tears, welling along her lower lashes with human-like viscosity, catching fractured light as they spilled over. Identical tears, the soldier noted, to those still drying on her daughter's cheeks. "You brought her back." The queen's voice resonated through the vaulted space, though she barely spoke above a whisper. Her gaze traveled the length of the soldier's battered armor, registering every scrape and bloodstain. Whatever calculation passed behind those luminous eyes bypassed tactics, bypassed species, landing squarely on the exhausted man beneath the plating. The princess was already speaking in rapid Valen syllables, hands gesturing toward distant battlefields, toward the wound clotting on her calf, toward the soldier now shifting his weight between bruised ribs. The queen absorbed the words without interruption, her thumbs tracing old restraint scars encircling her daughter's wrists, mapping pains she hadn't been present to prevent. A murmur rippled through the assembled court. Guards who had stood ready to impale an Earth soldier now exchanged glances, their weapon stances slackening. The queen's mantle rippled cobalt as she turned their joined hands upward, revealing the calluses and burns marring her child's palms, marks no royal heir should bear. Mom. The princess's Earth-standard word fractured the whispered Valen around them, a single syllable whose meaning needed no translation. The queen's breath caught audibly, her free hand rising to cradle her daughter's cheek, smearing soot across pearlescent skin. Something heavy clattered to the floor, a guard's energy pike slipping from loosened fingers. No one moved to retrieve it. The queen's tears traced gleaming paths down cheeks just slightly sharper than human, landing on their clasped hands where they shimmered strangely before dissipating into mist. The soldier became abruptly aware of his own breathing, too loud in this silent hall, too human amid beings whose lungs processed different atmospheric ratios. His medical scanner chose that moment to emit a warning chime, the display indicating critically depleted nutrition reserves. 24 Velan heads turned at the electronic chirp. The queen didn't. Her attention remained fixed on her daughter's face, drinking in features last seen on surveillance footage years stale. When she finally spoke again, it was directly to the soldier, her Earth-standard words shaped with careful precision. "You carried her through fire." Not a question. A quiet etching of fact into the crystalline air between them. The princess swayed slightly on her feet, exhaustion and lingering adrenaline warring beneath her skin. The queen's arm slid around her shoulders with practiced ease, supporting weight while keeping injured ribs clear. A door groaned open somewhere in the stronghold's depths. Servants bearing medical implements hurried forward, hesitated at the threshold awaiting permission. The queen's nod was barely perceptible, yet sent them rushing forward in a rustle of specialized fabrics and clinking vials. Her free hand remained extended toward the soldier, palm up in wordless invitation, just as her daughters had been in the ruins. Around them, the court remained motionless. Observing this breach of millennia-old protocol, a human invited into the innermost sanctum. Not as prisoner, not as ambassador, but as something the Velan language didn't yet have a word for. Above it all, the throne room's crystal dome refracted the light of twin suns, scattering prismatic patterns across three figures standing where history's tide turned. The princess leaned forward, her silver hair falling like a curtain between them and the watching court, her forehead pressed against her mother's in a gesture too intimate for public audiences, something that belonged in quiet chambers behind closed doors. The soldier should have looked away, granted them privacy in this unguarded moment. But he couldn't. Neither could the assembled Velans, their weapons frozen in hands that had known nothing but war for years. Tears welled at the edges of the queen's luminous eyes, clinging to dark lashes before breaking free. They caught the light refracting through the crystal dome overhead, transforming into tiny falling stars as they traced the sharp angles of her face. The princess's own tears mirrored their path, carving pale tracks through battlefield grime. Liquid met liquid where their skin touched, a silent exchange of grief and relief that needed no translation. The soldier's grip tightened on his empty rifle strap. Briefing vids had described Velan tear ducts as waste vents, biological necessities devoid of emotion, like reptile scales shedding excess salt. Yet here they were, spilling in perfect rhythm with the queen's trembling fingers where they clutched her daughter's scarred wrists. No tactical analysis had prepared him for how familiar those gestures looked. A mother's hands checking for new wounds while memorizing old ones, a child leaning into the touch after too long without it. The princess murmured something against her mother's brow. The queen's response resonated through the chamber despite its softness, a subharmonic frequency that made the nearest crystalline pillars vibrate faintly. The courtiers reacted as if struck, back straightening, breaths catching. 3 guards who had been edging toward the soldier halted mid-step. Then the queen shifted her head just enough to look past her daughter, her gaze finding the human soldier for the second time. Tear tracks glistened on cheeks more angular than any human's, the liquid refracting light in slight prismatic shimmers. Yet the rawness in her expression was universality. That language needed no interpreter. His helmet's tactical display chose that moment to flash a low-power warning across his vision, its sterile blue text overlaying the scene. For the first time since deployment, he ignored it. Let the systems die. Let the recording stop. This moment demanded witness without filters. The princess turned her face slightly, her tear-glazed eyes finding his. No words passed between them, but none were needed. The soldier had seen the same expression on human faces in evacuation ships. The same gratitude, the same exhaustion, the same cautious hope kindling where only ashes had been. A servitor approached with a basin of water that swirled with minute bioluminescent particles, some Velan equivalent of antiseptic. The queen intercepted it without breaking contact with her daughter, dipping her fingers into the liquid before carefully pressing them to the crusted wound on the princess's calf. the younger woman hissed, her grip tightening on her mother's forearms. A purely reflexive reaction, one any species might make. Watching them, the soldier felt something unravel in his chest. 14 months of conditioning whispered that Valens didn't experience pain as humans did, that their vocalizations were mimicry, their expressions calculated manipulations. Yet here was their monarch, her face contorting in sympathetic anguish as she tended her child's injuries. A deep chime sounded from somewhere in the stronghold's upper levels. Courtiers began murmuring, moving to stations he couldn't decipher. The queen straightened slowly, her mantle shifting from grief blue to something warmer like dawnlight on snow. One hand remained tangled in her daughter's hair as she addressed the assembled crowd in resonant Velan, but her other extended, not in command, not in threat. An open palm, still damp with tears, angled toward the soldier. Understanding rippled through the chamber. The same sentries who had barred his passage now stepped aside. The same warriors whose comrades he'd killed bowed their heads. Across species lines, through layers of propaganda and pain, one truth had crystallized in that hall. Love required no translation. The last thing he saw before attendants rushed forward to tend their own wounds was the princess's fingers, still interlaced with her mother's, squeezing tight enough to whiten alien knuckles, a grip that said, despite everything, we survived. The gardens hummed with bioluminescence as dusk settled. Petals caught the fading light in slow pulses, their rhythm syncing with whatever passed for Velan circadian cycles. The soldier sat on a bench not meant for human proportions, its curves pressing oddly against his armored back. 3 rooms away, medics worked on the princess's injuries. 2 corridors over, the Queen's Council debated his fate. Yet here, where blue-tinted leaves whispered against each other, the war felt like someone else's story. He examined the datapad they'd given him, Earth transmissions intercepted over the past week. The same phrases looped across every channel: rogue operative, unauthorized extraction, potentially compromised. His own image flickered on protest footage outside Earth Command headquarters, sometimes with horns crudely drawn on his helmet. A weight settled beside him. The Queen's robes shimmered even in low light, their layered fabrics shifting between indigo and the color of deep space. She carried no guards, no visible weapons, just a carved box that smelled faintly of resin. You asked for context, she said. Her Earth standard had improved since the throne room, less careful, more fluid. The box opened to reveal an array of holographic crystals, each etched with symbols that hurt his eyes to focus on directly. She selected one. The projection bloomed above them, a Velan child laughing as she chased floating lights through a courtyard. Silver hair streamed behind her like comet trails. The soldier recognized the eyes first, that particular shade of green threaded with gold. This was the princess decades before restraint scars, before black labs. This was her 10th summer. The Queen's finger traced the child's path. She'd just mastered light harmonics. Could make the garden lamps dance. The next crystal showed the same girl older, standing at a scholar's podium, demonstrating some technology that made human holographics look primitive. Then the war years, grainy footage of the princess directing field hospitals, shielding patients during bombardments. The Queen fast-forwarded through these scenes, her fingers stiff. You thought we bred warriors. She said it neutrally, watching his face. We raised physicists, biologists. The final crystal activated. Security footage of the princess strapped to an examination table. Human scientists in hazard suits circling while she spoke calmly to them through the pain. His stomach tightened. The projection vanished. Around them, the garden's glow intensified as full night descended. Somewhere above the crystal dome, human and Velan ships still exchanged fire over contested orbitals. You've bridged a gap we thought unbridgeable, the Queen said. Not gratitude, not praise. Just a statement of measurable fact, like noting a repaired communications array. His gauntlet lay on the bench between them. She studied its seam lines, the slight scorching along the forearm plate. When she reached out, he expected some diplomatic gesture. Instead, her fingers brushed a nearly invisible scar near his wrist. Pulse rifle backlash, she noted. 3rd-generation MK-47s had faulty dampeners. The specificity startled him. She smiled without showing teeth. My daughter isn't the only one who studies her enemies. A chime sounded from the palace depths, some Velan equivalent of a diplomatic summons. The Queen stood, her robes settling into new constellations of color. She left the holographic crystals on the bench. Alone again, the soldier reactivated the earliest recording. The child princess laughed as luminescent moths swirled around her outstretched hands. His tactical overlay automatically tagged the species, unknown classification, presumed harmless. He disabled the analysis function. Some things needed no taxonomy. Far above, through layers of crystal and conflict, a human dropship broke Atmo on approach vectors the Valen defenses no longer contested. The soldier touched the scar on his wrist, then the princess's hologram. 2 wounds, 2 bridges. The math seemed suddenly simple. When the first human envoy stepped blinking into the throne room hours later, they found an Earth soldier already standing at the Valen Queen's right hand, his rifle dismantled on the peace table, its power core repurposed to illuminate the negotiation charts. And in the gardens below, undisturbed by history's machinery, the holographic moths danced on. The great hall pulsed with layered harmonies, crystalline arches amplifying notes that fluttered between vocal ranges no human choir could replicate. Valen musicians stood in curved formations, their throat sacs vibrating to produce chords that shimmered in the air like heat off desert stone. Tables curved in organic spirals, their surfaces swirling with liquid bioluminescence that reacted to movement. Human hands left temporary trails glowing pale gold where they passed. The soldier sat at the queen's left, his earth-made dress uniform tight across shoulders built for combat rather than diplomacy. 5 courses had come and gone, dishes featuring spices that made his sinuses burn and fruits that dissolved like sweetened oxygen on his tongue. Across the table, a Valen medic watched him sample a translucent blue pod, her nose ridges flaring slightly when he didn't immediately cough. "Try pressing it to your palate," the princess murmured from his right. She demonstrated with her own serving, the motion elegant despite the healing scars circling her wrists. Our taste receptors cluster differently. Human and Valen eyes met cautiously over shared platters. A trade liaison from the Martian colonies hesitated before accepting a goblet filled with liquid that sloshed upward against gravity. The Valen courtier who offered it mimed drinking motions with exaggerated patience, her elongated fingers flexing in what might have been amusement. The princess moved between groups with effortless grace, her silver hair catching the hall's shifting light. Here she paused to translate for a Terran admiral, struggling to complement the architecture. There she smoothed a cultural misunderstanding about utensil usage with quiet words that made both parties chuckle. When 2 junior officers, one human, one Valen, nearly collided while reaching for the same delicacy, she simply placed a hand atop theirs and guided the morsel into mutual division. Music swelled as the queen rose from her elevated seat. Conversation dimmed without needing her call for silence, just the natural hush that follows when gravity shifts. Her mantle flowed like captured nebulas as she descended to the main floor, stopping first before the oldest human envoy. "They say your people build monuments to peace in times of war," she said, her voice carrying easily through the acoustically perfect space. A servitor brought forth a slender crystal, its interior swirling with miniature constellations. "We grow ours." The envoy accepted the gift gingerly. As his fingers closed around it, the trapped stars flared brighter, forming patterns that vaguely resembled Orion's belt before dissolving into new arrangements. The Valen court murmured approval. Near the hall's eastern arch, a clatter of dropped cutlery drew attention. A human lieutenant stood frozen as his knife hovered mid-air, caught in a Valen child's tentative telekinetic grasp. The girl's ear frills flared, crimson with embarrassment, until the lieutenant slowly extended his palm and said in badly mangled Valen, "Fly it home." The yelp, resulting laughter rang reassuringly. Through both species contingents, dessert arrived on floating platters that drifted between guests, stopping when waved down. The soldier selected something that looked vaguely like cake, only for it to melt into floral-scented vapor at first contact with his fork. The princess laughed quietly at his expression. "Breath sweets," she explained, demonstrating how to inhale at the proper angle. Her mother watched this exchange with guarded amusement from across the room. As courses transitioned to ceremonial dances, the soldier noticed the subtle shifts in body language around him. Valen warriors who had initially positioned themselves strategically between him and vulnerable points now stood with weapons angled downward. Human officers whose hands had hovered near concealed sidearms earlier in the evening left them resting openly on the table. A young Valen, barely more than a cadet, approached his position, bearing a small dish of salt-glazed nodules. "From my family's spire gardens," she said in careful Earth standard. "We harvest them under the double moons." The offering trembled slightly in her hands, but her chin stayed level. The soldier accepted them bare-handed, ignoring protocol about testing food for toxins. When the nodules burst tart then sweet against his teeth, the cadet's shoulder markings pulsed faintly blue in approval. At evening's end, the queen lifted her ceremonial cup, not toward fellow nobles but directly to the soldier. The gesture made several courtiers inhale sharply. "To Bridges," she said simply. Across the hall, human and Valen voices echoed the toast in uneven harmony. Above them all, suspended from the vaulted ceiling, a joint holographic display slowly resolved into the twin constellations both cultures had once used to navigate toward each other's throats. Now it charted a different course entirely. The transmission arrived at midnight, an encrypted pulse cutting through the orbital relays. Earth Command seal materialized in stark crimson against the darkened viewport, its edges flickering with interference from the nebula between star systems. The soldier sat alone in the Valen communications alcove, breathing in the bitter almond scent of their organic interface resins, watching as the message unscrolled before him like a condemned man reading his pardon or his execution order. "The bridge has been built." The words glowed with sterile neutrality. No operational parameters, no extraction coordinates. Just one final line that made the scar on his wrist throb. "Will you cross it?" His gauntlet hovered over the acknowledgement key. Behind that simple question lay weeks of debate back on Earth, command staff arguing over his actions in the secure bunkers beneath Geneva, public news feeds spinning wild theories about the Valen Whisperer, who'd walked unarmed into enemy territory. The display split to show simultaneous broadcasts, one channel looping footage of cheering crowds outside the Capitol dome, another displaying a military tribunal docket, bearing his name between charges of insubordination and fraternization with hostiles. The princess found him there minutes later, barefoot on the chilled observation deck. She carried no datapads, no diplomatic communiques, just 2 steaming cups of something that smelled faintly of citrus and burnt honey. Her eyes flicked to the frozen frames of his court-martial proceedings reflected in the viewport. "You expected gratitude?" she observed, not mocking, just stating the equation aloud. He rotated the cup between his palms, feeling the heat seep through his calluses. "I expected consequences." The tribunal judges' faces glared up from the tablet, 3 admirals he'd served under during the Cygnus campaign. All decorated veterans, all visibly furious. She settled onto the curved bench beside him, close enough that her sleeve brushed his forearm. The silence stretched as they watched a Valen supply freighter navigate the docking arrays below, its ion trails painting brief silver scars across the stars. "Rebuilding takes longer than destroying," she said finally. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup where the liquid caught the starlight. "One soldier plants a seed. Another pours acid on it. The garden grows anyway." The display updated with fresh reports. A riot outside Jupiter Station. Protesters clashing over whether his actions constituted treason or salvation. Ticker feeds scrolled casualty estimates from the latest skirmishes. Numbers stark beside footage of the first joint human Valen medical team deploying to the war-torn colonies. He exhaled through his nose. The choice wasn't between orders and rebellion anymore. The real bridge spanned something far more treacherous, the chasm between what Earth feared and what the Valens remembered. Her fingers stilled on the cup. "They won't welcome you back as a hero, I know, or trust you here as one of us." That drew a half-smile. "Notice that, did you?" She turned the tablet toward herself, studying the angry faces of his former superiors. When she spoke again, her voice held neither pity nor condemnation, just the same steady certainty she'd carried through ruins and reunion halls alike. "You don't cross bridges because the other side promises safety." Below them, another ship launched, a Terran courier vessel streaking toward the jump point. The message pinged once more in his periphery, unattended but undeniable. Outside, the stars burned indifferent. Inside, the cup warmed his hands. Somewhere between court-martial proclamations and riot footage, between her measured breaths and the pounding of his own heart, the answer took shape, not as a revelation, but as something that had been there all along. He reached for the console. The acknowledgement tone sounded softly in the dimness, its echo bouncing off crystalline walls that had once seemed alien. The princess inclined her head, silver hair catching the console lights. No dramatic pronouncements, no fanfare, just two people watching as fresh data packets cascaded across the screen. Deployment orders for the 1st Joint Peacekeeping Battalion, medical exchange protocols, agricultural relief charts. The work of 10,000 hands begun by one impossible choice. Her fingers brushed his wrist, just over the old pulse rifle scar as the next transmission arrived. The private chamber smelled of ozone and lunar jasmine, the scent clinging to Evelyn Crest's tailored diplomatic uniform as she strode in without announcement. Her boots made no sound on the Valen crystal flooring, the same way her tablet's screen gave nothing away until she tilted it toward the light. "You've created quite the mess." Her voice carried neither accusation nor approval, just the crisp enunciation of someone who charged by the hour for bad news. The tablet flickered to life between them, displaying intercepted communiques in dual columns. Valen sigils on the left, Earth military encryption on the right. The soldier recognized General Vargas' cipher at a glance. Back on Earth, those clipped, impersonal directives had dictated his movements for years. Here they outlined contingency plans for orbital bombardments should V-Royal components prove salvage incompatible. Evelyn swiped left. A different set of documents appeared, these in angular Valen script. Zithus's faction, she noted, tapping a passage that pulsed ominously. The translation stuttered to life beneath it. The bridge must burn. His knuckles whitened around the chair's armrests. The princess had mentioned Zithus in passing, a Valen hardliner who'd opposed every ceasefire. Seeing his words laid bare like this made the threat concrete. Evelyn rotated the display, revealing layered schematics of the very stronghold they sat in now. Red markers highlighted structural weak points. Both sides have factions who profit from continued conflict. Your little rescue endangered defense contract's worth trillions. Her manicured nail traced a shipping manifest appended to the files. Human-made components flowing to Valen insurgents. Our mutual enemies are better at capitalism than diplomacy. Silence pooled between them. Outside the crystalline walls, the stronghold's gardens shimmered under twin moons, oblivious to the machineries of war turning beneath their beauty. She leaned forward, her perfume giving way to something sharper. Adrenaline, maybe. Or fear. They're already rewriting history planetside. Some claim you orchestrated the princess's capture from the start, that she was bait in an elaborate human ploy. A muscle twitched near her temple. If the moderate Valen start believing that, his gauntlet scraped against the table when he reached for the tablet. The schematic zoomed under his touch, revealing timestamps from mere hours earlier. Fresh intelligence. Current as the breath in his lungs. Evelyn watched his face rather than the screen. We have 86 hours before Zithus moves against the Queen. The General's forces will reach jump distance in 72. She produced a second device, a slim comm unit with Earth Command's encryption protocols. Your people want orders. Your new friends need warnings. Choose carefully. The tablet chimed with an update. A third column appeared. Trade agreements between Zithus's faction and off-world mining conglomerates. Resources to rebuild after inevitable hostilities. No mention of the hospital towers or Weaver's thread constellations. Just cold arithmetic dictating who lived and died for profit. Wind chimes sounded in the corridor, the Valen equivalent of approaching footsteps. Evelyn stood smoothly, retrieving her devices with practiced ease. They'll come for you first when it collapses, she murmured. Too human for the Valens, too changed for Earth. The door crystals shimmered opaque just before the princess entered, her silver hair catching the glow of the chamber's biomechanical lighting. She glanced between them, nostrils flaring slightly at Evelyn's scent lingering in the air. I brought the atmospheric survey logs you requested, she said, extending a data crystal. Her fingers brushed his when he accepted it, an incidental contact that carried unmistakable weight. Evelyn inclined her head in flawless Valen courtesy. Your Grace. The title held just enough edge to acknowledge the unspoken tension. The princess's answering smile didn't reach her eyes. You'll join us for the evening meal, Diplomat Crest? Zithus's envoys will be attending. A beat of silence. Evelyn's tablet glowed faintly through her pocket lining. Somewhere within its encrypted depths, timers counted down toward intersecting catastrophes. Of course, Evelyn said. Nothing builds bridges like shared sustenance. Her gaze flicked to the soldier as she left, carrying all the unspoken warnings that wouldn't fit into diplomatic niceties. The door crystals cleared behind her. Outside, the gardens pulsed with bioluminescent life, beautiful and utterly blind to the storm converging overhead. The jamming tower loomed against a sky streaked with meteor trails, silent silver needles slicing through the atmosphere. They moved in the shower's afterglow, 3 shadows weaving through abandoned maintenance tunnels. The soldier led with rifle ready, his HUD glitching from proximity to the tower's interference field. Evelyn Crest followed, her diplomatic silk swapped for tactical blacks, fingers dancing over a stolen access tablet. The princess brought up the rear, barefoot still, her steps silent where theirs scraped against cold alloy. Thermal scans showed 12 guards patrolling the outer perimeter. Their heat signatures pulsed steady green, no elevated heart rates, no indication of alarm. The soldier exhaled slowly. First advantage, Zithus's forces didn't expect an assault from within their own secure zone. Evelyn palmed the outer hatch's control panel. 37 seconds until the next sentry pass, she whispered. The princess pressed close, her 3-fingered hand overlapping the humans to realign the biocircuitry. The door hissed open on lubricated hinges. Inside smelled of charged ions and stale coolant. The tower's innards throbbed with a deep subsonic hum that vibrated in the teeth. Control consoles spiraled upward along the central shaft, each level pulsing with data streams the soldier couldn't parse. The princess's eyes tracked the scrolling glyphs, her pupils contracting. Main dampening grid is 2 levels up, she murmured. Guarded. The soldier checked his charge pack. Half capacity. Standard issue didn't account for prolonged engagements behind enemy lines. He glanced at the princess, her chapped lips, the fresh scabs along her collarbone where Zithus's interrogators had worked. You're risking everything for us, she didn't hesitate. Because you did the same for me. Her fingers twitched toward his elbow, the Valon equivalent of a steadying grip. Sometimes bridges aren't meant to burn. Evelyn was already moving, climbing the maintenance rung set into the curved walls. The soldier followed, his armor's joints protesting the quick, silent ascent. Level 2 opened into a vaulted chamber dominated by the jamming array, a monstrous lattice of crystalline nodes thrumming with restrained power. 4 guards stood at cardinal points, their armor thicker than the perimeter sentries. No cover. No element of surprise now. The soldier's rifle slid into his shoulder pocket by instinct. 3 headshots would be clean. The 4th might get a warning off. His finger hovered over the trigger housing. The princess stepped past him, her voice cut through the chamber, sharp with regal command. The guards startled at the sound, not just at her presence but at the words themselves. Later, the soldier would learn it was the ancient formal dialect last used for royal decrees. Their hesitation lasted precisely 1.3 seconds. Evelyn moved first, her stunner catching the nearest guard mid-turn. The soldier's rifle coughed twice. The princess was already at the main console, her fingers flying across controls that required no screen, just rippling light fields responding to her touch. Alarms blared. The tower's humming pitch climbed sharply. Somewhere above, heavy doors rumbled open on automated tracks. Reinforcements inbound. Nearly. The princess's announcement cut off as a figure emerged from the upper walkway. Zithus's scarred face twisted in recognition, his sidearm rising. The soldier tackled her behind a console bank as the first shot scorched the air where her skull had been. Static shrieked through the chamber, part disrupted systems, part feedback from the princess's frantic work on the dampeners. Zithus advanced, shouting orders. The jammer scrambled into distortion. His weapon chambered a fresh power cell with a click that carried over the chaos. Then the tower groaned. The princess's fingers stilled on the controls. A final keystroke. All screens died at once. The hum cut off mid-cycle, leaving ringing silence. Somewhere beyond those shielded walls, the Queen's forces would be receiving clear signals for the first time in weeks. Zithus snarled. His pistol swung toward the princess, only to jerk wildly when Evelyn's stunner found its mark. The weapon discharged into the ceiling, raining shards of coolant tubing. Boots pounded in the corridors. Not the heavy tread of armored reinforcements, but the lighter steps of the Queen's personal guard. The soldier exhaled, his rifle's sights still trained on Zithus's twitching form. The princess stood, her torn robes fluttering in the sudden draft from opening hatches. Her palm pressed flat against the central node, feeling the last vibrations of dying systems. This ends now. Outside the shattered windows, the meteor shower's afterglow painted the sky in fading silver. Distant ships burned through atmosphere, their trajectories unhindered by jamming fields. The bridge held. Somehow, impossibly, it held. Zithus staggered as his command console went dark, its holographic displays dissolving into static. The emergency lights painted his scarred face in pulsing crimson, highlighting the fury twisting his features. Traitor! He spat the word at the princess like an accusation, flecks of saliva catching the dim glow. His armored fist smashed the now useless controls. You gut your own people for these vermin? The princess stepped forward without hesitation. Blood trickled from a gash on her temple where a ricochet had grazed her, its path tracing a jagged silver line through the grime on her skin. This ends now, she said, her voice carrying the weight of both command and sorrow. Behind her, the soldier kept his rifle trained on Zethus's chest, finger poised on the trigger housing. Zethus laughed, a harsh metallic sound that echoed through the dead consoles. You think disabling one tower changes anything? My ships still hold the orbitals. My allies, a low chime interrupted him. Across every still active screen in the chamber, a single code sequence flashed. Tamandri. The princess's disable command rippling through the entire network. Zithus's smirk faltered as the implications registered. Outside the fractured observation windows, streaks of light descended through the atmosphere, not missiles, but sleek Valon interceptors in full combat formation. Not Zithus's colors, the Queen's. The general whirled toward the princess, sidearm clearing its holster with practiced speed. The soldier's rifle barked once. A controlled shot, knee instead of center mass. Zithus collapsed with a roar, his weapon skittering across the floor. You used my access codes, the princess murmured. Turned our defenses inward against the vulnerable. She knelt beside the writhing general, her tattered robes pooling around her. The gesture held no mercy, just clinical observation. But you forgot who wrote those encryption protocols. The soldier recalled nights in the garden alcoves, watching her fingers dance across holographic schematics. Not studying language or politics as he'd assumed. Reverse engineering the very systems her mother's generals had built. Zethus snarled up at her, his leg painting the deck plates emerald. You'd make us slaves to those apes. The princess didn't flinch. I'd make us something better than what we've been. The first loyalist ship docked with a resonant thud that shuddered through the station's skeleton. Boots pounded in the corridors beyond. Not the staggered rush of rebels, but the disciplined cadence of royal guards. Zithus's remaining officers looked to him for orders. The general's jaw worked silently as the tactical reality solidified. His hand crept toward a thigh compartment, too slowly. Evelyn appeared from behind a sparking console, her stolen sidearm leveled at Zithus's temple. I wouldn't. Her voice carried the weariness of someone who'd seen too many last stands. They'll want you alive for the tribunals. The princess rose, her bare feet leaving bloody prints on the cold metal. At the viewport, the Queen's fleet assumed defensive positions around the crippled station. Their running lights formed intricate patterns, the old war codes declaring a contested zone pacified. Zithus saw it too. His shoulders slumped incrementally, the fight leaching out of him beneath the weight of that unspoken verdict. You've doomed us all, he whispered. But the words lacked conviction. The soldier finally lowered his rifle. His HUD flickered, systems rebooting now that the jamming field had collapsed. Incoming transmissions scrolled across his display, status reports from human and Valon vessels moving to secure the orbitals, medical teams en route to civilian sectors, a priority communique from Earth Command marked with the tri-signal that meant stand down. The princess exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the cracked viewport. Beyond it, the stars burned indifferent. The same constellations both species had once used to navigate toward each other's destruction now framed an entirely different course. Zithus's restrained figure was hauled away by royal guards, his limping form dwarfed by the armored escorts. His curses dissolved into the hum of reactivating systems. Evelyn holstered her weapon with a click. That could have gone worse. The princess turned from the viewport. Dried blood crusted her knuckles, her borrowed human fatigues hanging loose on her slender frame. Yet when she met the soldier's eyes, Something in her gaze carried the weight of crowns and consequences alike. It still might, she said softly. But outside the windows, the Queen's ships held formation. And for now, that was enough. The celebrations lasted precisely 17 hours before the message arrived. It shimmered into existence on every terminal simultaneously, Earth and Valon systems compromised alike. Letters forming from digital static. The bridge may still stand, but the war is far from over. No signature. No routing data. Just those 12 words dissolving into cryptographic smoke before analysts could trace their origin. The soldier found the Queen in her war room, though it had been converted to peacekeeping operations days earlier. Maps of demilitarized zones glowed beneath her fingers as she realigned border markers. She looked up when he entered, her luminous eyes catching the light from tactical displays. No surprise showed on her face, just weary recognition. "They always send warnings," she said, tapping the glass where the message had appeared. Fear lingers longer than goodwill. Her mantle shifted colors with each breath, cycling through blues and violets like a heart rate monitor. Outside the crystalline walls, the stronghold's spires glittered under twin moons. Joint patrols, human and Valon soldiers walking side by side, made their rounds along the perimeter. The soldier noted how the two species kept their hands near weapons despite the truce, how their eyes tracked not just external threats, but each other. The princess was already at work when he found her in the communications hub. Her fingers moved through holographic transcripts, marking patterns only she could see. Dried blood still clung to her temple where Zithus's near miss had grazed her. She didn't acknowledge his presence until he placed a ration bar beside her console. Human chocolate, scavenged from his last field pack. "They're broadcasting from the debris fields," she said, cracking the bar in half. "Using old relay satellites we thought were dead." Her teeth left precise indents in the chocolate. No decadent enjoyment, just efficient calorie intake. Same faction that supplied Zithus with human weapon schematics. The soldier pulled up a stool. His armor chafed against healing bruises. "What do they want?" The princess turned a screen toward him. Security footage showed human and Valon children trading makeshift toys in the refugee camps. A rock painted like a starfish for a braided friendship band. "This," she said, and the opposite. Night deepened outside the arched windows. Somewhere beyond those glass panes, the first joint reconstruction teams were landing on the irradiated continents. The soldiers damaged. HUD still picked up their transmissions. Human engineers and Valon geomancers arguing over how to rebuild what two species had collective destroyed. The Queen joined them as dawn tinged the sky. Her fingers brushed her daughter's uninjured temple before moving to the console. "We have peace today," she said, calling up fleet positions. "Tomorrow demands our vigilance," and there it was, the fragile core of their victory. The Earth ships holding formation alongside Valon vessels, both watching the asteroid belts where remnant factions lurked. The soldier's own people had court-martial warrants waiting should he ever step foot on Earth again. The princess's former subjects whispered that she'd been brainwashed in human captivity. Yet the bridge held. The princess straightened, rolling stiffness from her shoulders. Scars peeked from beneath her collar where restraint cuffs had left permanent marks. "We should tour the western settlements," she said. "Show them the face of this peace they're being asked to trust." The soldier thought of the trenches they'd crossed to get here. The hospital tower still burning on 3 continents. The way Zithus had looked at her when he realized his own daughter had undone him. Outside, the first rain since the ceasefire began pattering against the crystal dome. The princess tilted her head, listening to its rhythm against the fortress walls. Somewhere in that sound she seemed to find resolve. The Queen's console chimed. Another message, this one from Earth's High Command. The soldier couldn't read its contents, but the way the Queen's mantle darkened told him enough. 72 hours, the princess murmured. Not a question. The Queen exhaled through her nostril slits. "Then we make them count." Beyond the windows, the patrols continued their uneasy circuits. Around conference tables, treaties were being drafted and broken in the same breath. And high above them all, the stars watched, silent witnesses to this fragile peace none of them dared believe would last. The orbital station's viewing deck stretched wide beneath their feet, its transparent floor offering an unobstructed view of the planet below, scarred continents slowly healing under newly demilitarized skies. Human and Valon engineers had designed the chamber together, blending Earth steel skeleton with Valan crystalline lattices that pulsed faintly blue at the joints. The air smelled of ozone and fresh polymers, undercut by the tang of human sweat and Valan floral oils from the assembled dignitaries. Fireworks burst silently in the vacuum beyond the observation glass. Not the crude chemical explosions of Earth's past, but precise hybrids. Human pyrotechnic formulas enhanced by Valan light-bending tech. Gold and silver streaks twined with luminous Valan harmonics, the patterns resolving into constellations both species had once used for navigation. The crowd murmured as the display shifted, human voices blending with Valan tonal hums. The princess stepped forward first. Her ceremonial robes retained echoes of battlefield wear, sturdy fabric, high collar to hide the restraint scars, but now embroidered with celestial patterns in silver thread. The signing tablet awaited her touch, its surface rippling with dual language options. She selected Valan script without hesitation, fingers pausing just above the surface. For 3 heartbeats, her eyes found the soldiers across the deck. Then she signed, her glyphs flowing with the same deliberate grace she'd used to disable Zithus's weapons. The soldier approached next. His dress uniform felt alien after months in combat armor, the stiff fabric tugging at healing wounds. His name on the document would void his Earth military standing permanently. Everyone in the chamber knew that. The tablet translated his signature into flowing Valan characters below the princess's, the 2 sets of writing mirroring each other like celestial bodies in orbit. Outside, the fireworks crescendoed. Human reds and blues spiraled around Valan light forms that hovered without fading, creating a living tapestry above the planet. Camera drones captured the moment from every angle, broadcasting it to colonies and homeworlds where reactions would range from jubilation to outrage. The princess shifted as cheers rose around them. Her bare wrist, usually hidden by sleeves, brushed against the back of the soldier's hand. Just for seconds. Just enough for her pulse to register against his skin before she moved to acknowledge the assembled delegates. They would call this the conquered dawn in later histories. Scholars would debate whether the real turning point came earlier. In ruined hospitals, atop irradiated ridges, in the moment a soldier chose to reach for a hand instead of a weapon. But here, now, with the dual nation station humming around them and their signatures still glowing on the tablet, symbolism mattered. The queen observed from her position among the Valan contingent. Her mantle swirled with subdued pride, its colors deepening when the princess glanced her way. No grand speeches interrupted the moment, just an almost imperceptible nod between monarch and heir that somehow carried more weight than any treaty, clause. Dignitaries pressed forward to add their own signatures beneath the first 2, human ambassadors with wary smiles, Valan counselors with sharp-nailed fingers tracing the unfamiliar shapes of Earth letters. The air thrummed with cautious optimism and untested trust. The soldier stepped back from the signing platform. His dress shoes clicked on the hybrid flooring, human materials bonded seamlessly with Valan tech. He could still feel the phantom warmth where the princess's skin had touched his. Not an accident. Not with her preternatural awareness of spatial relationships. On the observation deck below, a human child pressed small hands to the glass, watching the fireworks reflect in the eyes of a Valan youth standing beside her. Neither spoke the other's language yet. Neither needed to. The princess rejoined the soldier at the chamber's periphery. Together they watched as the last firework dissipated, its light particles dispersing to form a perfect hybrid sigil, Earth's olive branch woven through Valan harmony runes. The image held for 10 silent seconds before fading into starlight. Somewhere in the station's depths, reactors hummed. Air recyclers whispered. The great orbital wheel turned, its blended technologies proof that cooperation could birth something stronger than what either species could achieve alone. The princess's fingers found his again in the cover of departing crowds. Not tentative this time. Sure as sunrise. As declarations went, it was quieter than the fireworks, subtler than the treaty signing. But when the histories were written, when scholars debated how 2 warring civilizations found common ground, this silent clasp would tell the truer story. Outside, the stars burned on, indifferent to signatures and ceremonies. But aboard the station, in that fleeting moment between war and whatever came next, 2 hands stayed joined. A private pact, a quiet rebellion. A bridge built not of politics or necessity, but choices repeated daily in the face of easier hatreds. The cameras didn't capture that part. They didn't need to. Some truths didn't require broadcasting to endure. The Queen's fingers grazed the ceremonial orb, its crystalline surface reflecting dual constellations. You've given us hope for generations to come.